While most sample sets go out of their way to capture their horn sounds in great detail, one of the most important ways to make MIDI horns sound as realistic as possible is to use panning and ambience to make them sound as if they're in a real room. When you listen to any sound or multiple ones, your ear measures the time and volume differences to interpret where each of those sounds are coming from. A little work with panning and room ambience effects can help dramatically to make your horn sound much more natural. When you have a live horn section, each player is physically in a different section of the room since they can't occupy the same space at the same time. Here's a quick example of some music with all the horns panned to the center. Notice how it's a little tricky to pick out the individual sounds. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to each of the instruments and pan them a certain amount to the left or right to get everything out of the center, so it sounds more like different musicians playing on stage. There's really no specific rule on where to put everything. I just want to kind of make sure that no two instruments are actually occupying the exact same space. And I'll go ahead and play it back. So as you can hear, it already sounds better. One issue I'm noticing is that when I'm panning these, I'm also panning the ambience and reverb that is built into the sound. So instead of doing that using the built-in reverb, I'm actually going to send these to a separate reverb so the instruments are panned, but the reverb still takes the full spectrum like a room does. Here's an example of what I'm talking about. Notice how the reverb was actually panned, but in a real room, you would actually hear the reverb bouncing off all the walls, so it would still sound somewhat in the center. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into each of these and I'm going to actually turn the reverb send down. Here's the baritone sax. Go to the trombone. Turn it down here. Alto sax is next. Okay, and then the trumpet will be last. So now it's going to sound a little dry like this. Now I have all these going to an actual brass group, if you look here on the right. And what I will do now is I will just insert a reverb right here on the send, and that will let me send all of those different brass parts to a stereo room reverb. I'll use a simple and relatively inexpensive one. This is the Softube SAR 1R. Just drag it here. And I'll make a couple adjustments. I'll bring this down to more of a room type sound, so it's not quite as washy. A hall would be a little bit washy for this song. And I'll adjust the send amount as well. We don't want to send too much. Let's take a listen. Now, if you want to move the horn section back a bit so it isn't in your face as much, you can just increase the amount of effect send on the different track. You are increasing the volume a little too, though, so you may need to compensate by taking a little volume off of the brass group. There are no specific rules about where to put things, but with larger sections, you may want to just make sure that things don't sound too unbalanced in your arrangements. So try to make sure that if you have an instrument that has a lot of highs on the right, that maybe you have one that has a lot of highs on the left too. Also, if you want to be able to change the stereo spread throughout the song or just have a little easier control of it, one thing you can do is actually put a stereo widener / narrower on the brass bus, and then you can easily make adjustments to how wide everything is without having to go into each individual instrument and change that. The Waves S1 Imager or even the free Brainworks BX Solo plugin can help you do that. Here's a quick example with the Brainworks plugin on 50% wide and 150% wide so you can hear how it can narrow it or widen it. Towards the end there, I actually played it on some of the more drastic settings like 200% and 300% as wide. You probably wouldn't normally do that, but you can use that in your productions if you want to. The other benefit to widening something like that is that it kind of clears out the middle space, so if you have other instruments or vocals or something else, you can start to hear them a little better since you've kind of moved the brass parts to the sides. And that's all for now. Thanks for watching.